Well, this is Bishop John Dolan again, and I'm here with Father Tommie Jennings. He is the pastor of Christ the King Parish here in San Diego. And I grew up with Father TJ in the seminary. We were in the seminary together at St. Francis there at the University of San Diego. And I'm so very pleased that he is a part of this series called Treasures Found in a Kingdom Treasured, a part of our Christ in Our Neighborhood series, 7 days focusing on members of our African American community and just listening. We're not dialoguing, we're not offering comment, we're just listening to various responses from the African American community on a couple of questions. There are three questions that I've been asking, and I'm trying to remain as consistent as possible over these 7 days so that we get a different sense, maybe different answers on the issue of racism and on how African American men and women and children participate within the community here in the United States. So, Father TJ, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm so very pleased to see you here. And I know that during these moments, during the COVID moments where we have church up and running, and then it goes to closing, and then we have outside masses, and we have all of this, you know, I know you can be very busy, and I appreciate your taking the time to be here with our Christ in Our Neighborhood. So, Father TJ, we're going to get right to the question. What does racism mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm so delighted because a lot of time there's this silence where nobody talks about it, nobody attempts to have any kind of a conversation. And I think that it begins with some kind of way, some people talking not at each other, but talking with each other in conversation, looking for some kind of solutions. But for me, I was born in 1949. And as a little boy growing up, I remember hiding under the bed because Martin Luther King was coming down our way and KKK did not want him there. So they go through all of the neighborhoods shooting out all of the lights. And as frightened little boys, we were under the bed hiding and we were terrified. You talk about terrorism, we were terrified. And so the lesson we learned from that, and I think this is a pattern of my life, is my grandma mostly, but mom and dad would always tell us, you know, boys, you know, there are going to be some good white folks and there are going to be some bad white folks. And talk about those were the bad ones. And then she got into the other side. There are black, they use the N-word, and good ones. So what you have to do is sort out and find the good people to hang around with. And that kind of went through life. And also the other part of the message was about being positive. And no matter what, I still use this term today, no matter what we're going through, no matter how challenging, it's always finding the hand of God in this whole thing somewhere. And that's missing right now. There's so much hatred being spewed all over the place. But for me, as I was growing up, that was a part. And then I had another big, beautiful experience. Miss Nichols, an old elderly white lady, she hired me. This was my first job. And I was working her yard work as a high schooler. And she said, come on in, I'm going to set the table, we're going to have lunch. And then she invited this very affluent couple over, local, very rich. And we were around the table and they looked at her and looked at me. And he's not eating with us, is he? And she said, well, that's Tommie. And yes, he is eating with us. And to that, they got up and left. And so once again, another experience of that. And then going to the restrooms and the books in school, we never saw a brand new book. You know, all the separate but equal talk was going on as we were growing up. But all through all of that was always trying to find and looking for something positive. And after all of these years, we still find this ugly sin of racism is still in our midst. We can send people to all these different planets. We can send all this modern advancement in technology, and it goes on and on. But we still haven't been able to ever sit down hardly and talk about this one. But as I was growing up, some of the things that I've been looking at, let me hold this a second. As I was growing, I was just looking at and trying to balance all of this with things that were happening in life and things that should have been happening. I think another big moment for me was when I joined the Marine Corps. Um, Mr. Pond was a racist. And guess what they do in boot camp? They put you in, your bunkmate is that person that clearly comes out that don't like you. He hated black people. And so throughout that whole thing, the drill instructor Anderson, he always wanted his checkerboard. He wanted the one here, one there. And so through that, we got to work through and talk about racism, where we grew up. And I think a part of the solution here is actually sitting down and getting to know people and getting to know them, not just a casually passive knowledge of the person, but a deep understanding of why a person is that way. And that's the only way we're going to tear down some of these barriers. I think I went enough on this piece.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you hit the very important point. Pope Francis has urged us to, with regard to immigrants and migrants and refugees, is to share the journey, get to know
Yes,
people, listen to their
yes.
stories, and in essence,
John, one other point on this, I noticed that I work a lot with the African American community and the Spanish speaking community. And I find in the African American community, a lot of times they feel put aside because through the immigration stuff that's been coming up, some of them are really sad because we never get to tell our story, one of them said in one of our meetings. And that's true. It looks like there's so much stuff that's overshadowing their story.
you
And
know,
I think this is a fine opportunity. It's too bad that it took George Floyd's life to kind of get us to come to the table and talk to one another.
yeah, and I think that was part of the purpose of this was really to listen and to continue the listening and also the dialogue as well and comments and so on, but not to allow the George Floyd event to be a singular event among other events,
Yeah.
but rather to focus on this continuum, kind of a continuum of not only care but of relationships that we should have within all cultures, but especially in within the African American culture.
John, throughout history, it looks like that there's been these opportunities, but they've been ignored. Like when uh, Rosa Parks sat on that bus on the front of, that once again was an opportunity, but there were so many things happening with the riots and stuff that was going on, and with the shocker, Bull Connor and his bull whips and the fire hoses and stuff. Once again, it was overshadowed. And then once again, we see the violence and the police shootings and stuff like that, once again, is presenting itself. And like I agree with you, we should not just have this one little thing like the George Floyd event, but see that as something that's helping move us toward, hey, here it is again. What are we going to do this time?
Well, I appreciate that, and the other questions that I had posed to our other members
Mhm.
are kind of broad, admittedly. But the first question I ask you is, or rather the second, I should say, is what does our society, what specifically the American society, the U.S. society, offer to you as a African American priest, African American man? What does it offer to you?
First of all, thank you for using the term African American, because there's some discussion in a recent conversation about, well, do they call them black or do they call them African Americans? And of course, part of the conversation was, well, all blacks aren't African Americans. And
Right,
so, but it's proper to call me an African American because that's what I am.
right.
I'm not from Haiti or some of these other countries. But anyway, back to the main point here. Me, America, fighting for the country. I love this country, but I don't let the sins of the past just completely overshadow, so we want to just dump the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I've seen America come to a point where, okay, we had racism. what are we going to do? How can we work to get beyond this and not let this continue to just lower the bar on everything? And there are a lot of other sins here too. Like, look at what happened with capitalism. The idea of capitalism was for it to be something that could be something that people could lift and grow out, things like that. But when you got greed, unbridled capitalism, we see where that's going. The rich get richer. You get what terms we call white privilege and all of this kind of stuff. The abuses that's been going on. And the thing is, we need to look for a way when black, white, and all of the races can sit down together and see, well, how can you get what is your due? How can we help you get your due? And how can you help us working in that general direction? And not in a way where it's domineering, where, it was, I think that one of the ideas that Martin Luther King had was kind of like when you got one person there with his feet on another person's neck, you both don't move forward. So we got to get that point where we are walking together, working shoulder to shoulder. And for me, that's what I see America as. That's where I see we can go with this. But now I'm seeing too much division with, people building their silos. They just want to do their own little thing, but we got to move, tearing those silos down so we can all work together. And that's what I see. And that's where I am. And that's where my heart is with this.
Well, I appreciate that. I thank you very much for that, TJ. And the other piece, of course, is what do you, as an African American man or a priest, Catholic priest specifically, I suppose, but what do you bring to the table here in the United States culture?
Okay. One, a lot of my readings in the Gospels and that, like First Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name and humble themselves and pray, then and turn from their sins, then will I heal and heal their land. Verses like that, when we begin to shut God out, and I see sometimes the way people treat me, even as a priest. Uh, First of all, they think, first of all, I'm not a Catholic priest because they think that, but one of the gifts I think for me, one of the most precious and special gifts for me is the priesthood here in San Diego. I came here out of the military, and Father Boyd, God bless him, kept inviting me and encouraging me. And I think that that's something that rubbed off on me. One of the gifts that I have, and one of the strongest things, even in our community, is encouragement. You ask the kids, I'm always asking them, how are they doing in school? Black, white, Hispanic, encouraging, because sometimes the parents don't even encourage them.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I will say that about you, and to anyone who is listening, Father TJ, Father Tommie Jennings, he goes by Father TJ. I've known him as that, but that he has always been encouraging, And one line that I always enjoyed, Father TJ always said this was, what other people say about me behind my back is none of my business, and I always thought that was very good. But I really appreciate it. You are a very encouraging person and a delightful man and a true blessing to the Diocese of San Diego. And, I heard your phone going off there. And so you are in a very busy parish. It's right there in a very busy part of our city. And so I know you're a busy man. So I want to say thank you very much for the time that you spent with us today. And I thank all of you who are participating in our Christ in Our Neighborhood series. This, I think, is a very good series where we're just listening. We're not commenting. We're just listening. So thank you very much, and God bless.
You're welcome. God bless.
You too.